Sam Darnold is going to be starting in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. I'll say it louder for everybody in the back who did not hear me correctly. Sam Darnold will be a starting quarterback in the biggest game in the country in 2 weeks. If you told somebody this 4, 3, even 2 years ago, maybe even last year, nobody would have believed you. But here he is, Sam Darnold, in the Super Bowl. If you've been following Sam Darnold's story up to this point, you know how crazy of a ride Sam Darnold has been on throughout his NFL career. And if you haven't been following, well, you're in luck because that's today's video. We are going to go through Sam Darnold's entire career up to this point and how he became the quarterback he is today, because the story will blow your mind. We're going to go all the way back to the 2018 draft where there were quarterbacks galore and there were a lot of different quarterbacks you could have chose from. You have Baker Mayfield, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, right? The quarterback with the most dog in him, right? He was an underdog story that a lot of GMs were in love with. You also had Josh Rosen, seemingly the perfect quarterback prospect. You had a guy like Josh Allen, who had all the raw abilities to potentially be a difference-making type of quarterback in the future, and someone that Mel Kiper, a lauded ESPN NFL draft reporter, was in love with. And then you had the most tantalizing prospect in the draft, but also probably the one with the most concerns was Lamar Jackson, a former Heisman Trophy winner who lit up the entire college football world, but many thought he had flaws in his game. That led to Sam Darnold, who for months was the projected number one overall pick in this draft. He had the arm talent abilities. He had the size and speed and physical traits that you can't teach and that all GMs are looking for. Sam Darnold was a top QB prospect in this draft class. And of course, who had the number 3 overall pick in this draft? It was the New York Jets, a franchise who has been searching for their answer to Joe Namath for almost 60 years now. They have not had a franchise quarterback in their room for a long time. Now, you can chalk it up to them being cursed or whatever, but they are still searching. And they thought that Sam Darnold could be that answer in this draft. So when the Cleveland Browns surprisingly took Baker Mayfield number 1 overall, that led Sam Darnold dropping to number 3, where the New York Jets were sitting. And they chose Sam Darnold with that pick, the new franchise quarterback, potentially the savior of the New York Jets. And that's the word that I don't like using for quarterback prospects who go to the Jets, because when you get drafted by the Jets, in come a lot of lofty expectations. You don't have a lot of quarterbacks that you can follow, and you don't have a lot of quarterbacks to look up to, because you're supposed to be the answer. You're supposed to finally be the guy who the Jets can look upon and say, you are our greatest quarterback in franchise history. You are going to get us out of this hole. You are going to save us. And that's what Sam Darnold fell victim to. The New York Jets cycle. It's a dangerous cycle that so many young quarterbacks have gone through, have fallen through, and have failed under. And to start his Jets tenure, it was as you'd expect from this organization. They went 4-12. Todd Bowles was fired at the end of the year. There just wasn't much to write home about, even though Sam Darnold did have some nice moments. In his first career game against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football, mind you, even though his first ever pass was a pick six, he came back and won that game, and he played pretty well. And it had people thinking, maybe Sam Darnold could be the future of this franchise because we think he's pretty good. The Jets tried to invest in Sam Darnold in the best way they could, but we know with this franchise, if that's the best way they can provide adequate help for their franchise quarterback, we know it's not good enough. What they decided to do, in my opinion, really hindered the development of Sam Darnold, and it's a big reason why he is no longer in New York to this day. And that investment in Sam Darnold would lead them to hiring Adam Gase. Now, Adam Gase, of course, had a good reputation in the NFL, mostly because he was the offensive coordinator for Peyton Manning during the Denver Bronco era. Got them to 2 Super Bowls, won one of them. He was a respected head coach. The year before, he crashed and burned with the Miami Dolphins. He got fired, which led him to the New York Jets. The Jets put all their chips into Adam Gase, and they said, you're going to be the guy who develops Sam Darnold. Not only did they hire Adam Gase, but they also brought in Le'Veon Bell, one of the best running backs in the NFL. Of course, there was caution with Le'Veon Bell because he sat out the entire season prior because of a contract dispute with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers happily let him walk, and he signed a long-term 4-year deal with the New York Jets, becoming the highest paid running back in the NFL. So you had the coach and you had the big weapon. The Jets thought this was enough to help Sam Darnold in the near future and to help him really develop and reach his full potential. But that's really the big problem with the Jets. They made those two big moves, but they didn't see how incorrect these moves were. Like I mentioned, Adam Gase crashed and burned with the Miami Dolphins, failing to really elevate that offense with Ryan Tannehill. And Le'Veon Bell was just a problem on his own because he sat out the entire year just for some money. He did not have the desire to win in Pittsburgh, a place where winning is the expectation, not the goal. So if you're sitting out a whole year with an organization like the Steelers, what are you going to bring to the table for a losing organization like the Jets? To me, that was just never a match made in heaven. Le'Veon Bell was not successful in New York. Adam Gase was definitely not successful with the Jets, and it really hindered Sam Darnold's development, if you ask me. Not only that, but they failed to really build a proper offensive line around Sam Darnold. Their entire cap space went to signing Le'Veon Bell, and really they just had a revolving door at every position on the offensive line. They were an insanely bad offensive line. And then you had the wide receiver core. Yes, you had some solid guys like Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder who could really get it done, but there was never a true investment in a number one receiver, which we have learned throughout the course of NFL history. If you draft a quarterback in the first round, or at least you have a young guy who you believe in, you have to pair him up with a number one who can complement him very well. The Jets did not do that. They just said, we got to win by committee. And Sam Darnold, if you're good enough, you can make all these guys your number one. That's why the Jets failed with Sam Darnold. They just never had the proper structure around him. And I think any young quarterback could have failed in that system. And of course, Sam Darnold did not see any success in his 4 years with the New York Jets, which led to a pivotal decision after his 4th year. He had shown some flashes of some really nice play during his 4th year, but the next draft class was insanely QB heavy. You had Trevor Lawrence, projected number 1 overall pick, Trey Lance, one of the greatest FCS quarterbacks of all time, Mac Jones, who just had a Heisman contending type of QB season, Justin Fields, one of the best franchise quarterbacks for Ohio State in a long time, and then Zach Wilson, maybe the complete unknown quarterback of that draft class, but he just lit the entire internet on fire with his viral combine throw. And after they saw that throw, the Jets made their decision. We are moving on from Sam Darnold, and we are pivoting to Zach Wilson. They ended up drafting Zach Wilson with the 2nd overall pick in that year's draft, and they ended up trading Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers for a 2nd round pick and some change. And that's where Sam Darnold saw himself now in 2021. He was now the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. And at least the situation was a little bit better. They had Matt Rule, who was a very successful college coach and helped lead some pretty big rebuilds in the college game, most notably Baylor. Took them from the bottom of the barrel team facing all the sanctions and repercussions from their NCAA violations to a team that was legitimately contending for a national championship. You had key pieces on the offense like Christian McCaffrey, who a couple years ago was the Offensive Player of the Year, 2,000 scrimmage yards. He's insane. And of course, you had a number 1 wide receiver, which Sam Darnold had never had in his career, in DJ Moore. And DJ Moore was still figuring some things out, but the talent was clear. DJ Moore had it. So now you have a nice offensive structure around Sam Darnold. What would he do with this opportunity? And to start his Panthers career, he was pretty good. He started the year 3-0. He had some really nice games, and for once, the Panthers had hope that maybe this reclamation project they had in Sam Darnold could be the answer to their quarterback problem after Cam Newton's shoulder essentially fell off the bone. Well, unfortunately for Sam Darnold, things kind of fell apart from there. While the Panthers started off 3-0, they played some pretty bottom-of-the-barrel teams to start that year, and when they faced a playoff contending team that year in the 2021 Dallas Cowboys, well, they got embarrassed, and it was not a very good game for Sam Darnold, and it spelled the beginning of the end for Sam Darnold's tenure as potentially the franchise savior for Carolina. After that 3-0 start, they fell off entirely, falling to 4-7, and they pivoted to a different option. Remember how I mentioned Cam Newton's shoulder was falling off the bone? Well, they said, let's run it back. Cam Newton was brought back as the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, and he did not make things better. Me personally, I think they should have rolled it out with Sam Darnold because Cam Newton went 0-5 and had some of the worst QB performances of the decade during that stint. So the Carolina Panthers fall off. Sam Darnold once again can't prove the haters wrong, and right now the stigma around his career is that he's a bust. He hasn't lived up to any of the hype, and he may just be a career bridge guy or backup quarterback in the NFL. And that's exactly what happened to Sam Darnold. After the 2021 season, the Panthers decided to invest in another reclamation project from that same draft class in Baker Mayfield after he was casted away from Cleveland because of Deshaun Watson getting traded to the Browns. So now they had Baker Mayfield as their starting quarterback and Sam Darnold as their backup. And how did that go for the Panthers? Pretty bad. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL. Baker Mayfield had the worst year of his career. Matt Rule was fired midway through the year, and now Sam Darnold had another opportunity to perform mid-season. And under new interim head coach Steve Wilks, a very respected defensive mind in the NFL, Sam Darnold played pretty well. He led the Panthers to a 4-2 record while he was starting, and even had them in very small, but at least they had a chance, playoff positioning. They had a chance to win the NFC South very late in the year. Week 16 of that year, they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for potentially the division, where he went band for band with Tom Brady in his last year, putting up amazing stats with 341 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception versus Tom Brady's 432 yards and 3 touchdowns. So after the 2022 season, the organization that Sam Darnold was a part of had to make a decision on what to do with him. Do they keep him for this next regime, or do they move forward with a new franchise quarterback because they had a top pick? Well, the Carolina Panthers had the number 1 overall pick in the draft, and they were in position to draft Bryce Young, a former Heisman Trophy winner, and most likely the number 1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL draft. So that's exactly what they did. They let Sam Darnold walk in free agency, and they chose Bryce Young to be their next franchise quarterback. So now Sam Darnold was kind of in QB purgatory here. He was stuck. So he had a decision to make on his next home and what was best for his career going forward. He decided to sign with the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers, of course, were coached by Kyle Shanahan, one of the NFL's brightest minds in NFL history when it comes to offense. In Atlanta, he led one of the best offenses of all time with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. In San Francisco, he created an offensive powerhouse where he had seen so many different quarterbacks and offenses lead the way to potential Super Bowl winning teams. And that's what he had in San Francisco this year. It was a team with lofty expectations and offensive talent all over the place. Now, this stop in Sam Darnold's career, to me, is the most important stop he's made and probably the most important decision he made in his NFL career for a lot of different reasons. He was able to take like a gap year in the NFL and really learn under one of the brightest offensive minds ever in Kyle Shanahan and sit back and watch the greatness that was that 2023 49ers offense and to see how easy it can be to run an offense when you have the right coaching and structure and talent around you. He had support in the building because the 49ers decided to hire Steve Wilks as their defensive coordinator. That name sounds familiar because as of 5 minutes ago, I mentioned he was the interim head coach for the Panthers during the Matt Rule era. So now you have another guy in the building who believes in your abilities. He was able to reunite with Christian McCaffrey, who was traded from the team midway in 2022. And most importantly, he made a key relationship during his time in San Francisco, where he met Clint Kubiak, who at the time was the offensive passing game specialist under Kyle Shanahan. So Darnold built all these key relationships and was able to sit back as the San Francisco 49ers had a dominant year, making it all the way to the Super Bowl where they fell to the modern-day GOAT in Patrick Mahomes in an overtime classic. Now, after this year of sitting and learning, Sam Darnold was ready to prove that he would be a starting quarterback in the NFL again, and he had to make a big decision on where that best opportunity would be. And he decided it would be in Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell and all the offensive talent with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Minnesota offered the best opportunity for Sam Darnold in a very long time because this team offensively was loaded. They had Justin Jefferson, arguably the number 1 receiver in the NFL. You had a number 2 receiver in Jordan Addison, a first-round pick, a deep threat. and probably one of the best number 2 wide receivers in the NFL. You had TJ Hawkinson, a top 10 Pro Bowl caliber tight end, and another Pro Bowl caliber running back in Aaron Jones, who was just coming off years of success with the Green Bay Packers. For once in Sam Darnold's career, if he was the starter, he had stability and elite talent around him. But there was one issue standing in Sam Darnold's way, and that was the fact that at that point in his career, he was only seen to be the bridge quarterback for Minnesota. Yes, the Vikings, after signing Sam Darnold, decided to draft J.J. McCarthy with the 12th overall pick in that year's draft. So Sam Darnold was really seen to be nothing more than maybe you start 1 year and then we let J.J. McCarthy take the reins the next year, or maybe you start a couple games for us, and if you can't prove yourself, you have J.J. McCarthy breathing down your neck, ready to take your job at a snap. So that was the situation Sam Darnold was facing. It was either perform or you're out. But luck finally went Sam Darnold's way, because in the preseason of that year, after lighting up the NFL in his first preseason game, J.J. McCarthy ended up tearing his meniscus that very same game, and he was quickly ruled out for the year. That means Sam Darnold now had the full year without J.J. McCarthy breathing down his neck, without the expectation that he would be gone if he played poorly. He now had an opportunity with no media pressure, no expectations from anybody to be the franchise savior. He had a full year of free football to play with no pressure, and that was the best situation for Sam Darnold up to that point. And with that opportunity, Sam Darnold took off. I mean, he was hooping with the Minnesota Vikings. If you had fantasy football, if you played fantasy football that year, you know that there were tons of question marks with Justin Jefferson that year for fantasy. Would Sam Darnold be able to feed him? Well, the connection with Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold that year was one of the best in the NFL. Sam Darnold led that offense to a 14-3 record for the Minnesota Vikings, one of their best records in franchise history, the best since they went 15-1 back in 1999. Sam Darnold was named to his very first Pro Bowl. He was named the most improved player by the Pro Football Index of America. And he had the Minnesota Vikings in elite Super Bowl contention, somewhere they hadn't really truly been since 2017. This also sparked a huge debate within sports media. What should the Minnesota Vikings do with the quarterback situation? Because the expectation was for J.J. McCarthy to be the franchise quarterback for the long haul. But Sam Darnold was playing so well, it legitimately brought up the question, does Sam Darnold deserve the franchise QB spot over J.J. McCarthy? Should they trade J.J. McCarthy after this season and give the keys to Sam Darnold? And he had a couple of opportunities to really earn that franchise quarterback spot in Minnesota with some pivotal games down the stretch, starting with the battle for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC against the Detroit Lions in Week 18. Both of these teams are 14-2. They are 2 Super Bowl contending teams. The winner of this game gets the bye. They get home field advantage throughout the playoffs. All you have to do is win. And unfortunately for Sam Darnold, all the negative narratives came to light again because he played pretty poorly. He was a disappointing 18 for 41 passing through the air with only 155 yards to show for it, as the Lions embarrassed the Vikings and clinched the number 1 seed in the NFC. Questions started to arise again on Sam Darnold. Was he truly the number 1 guy? Did we react too early and crown him too early as a potential franchise quarterback for Minnesota? What will he do this offseason in the open market? Will teams be able to trust him if he's performing in big games like that? Now, he had a chance to right all of his wrongs from that Detroit game against the LA Rams in the wild card game. Sam Darnold's first career playoff game against one of the better teams of the 2020s. And unfortunately for Darnold, he again disappointed with another bad performance against the Rams. There was pressure in his face all night. He was not able to hit any of his open receivers. The offense fell flat, and they got embarrassed against a lesser 10-7 Los Angeles Rams team, failing to live up to the Super Bowl expectations that they had built up throughout the season. And all of a sudden, all of the debates that built throughout the season on if Darnold could be the franchise guy over J.J. McCarthy slowly started to fizzle out, because it was pretty clear that many people believed that the Minnesota Vikings should just roll with J.J. McCarthy because Sam Darnold, after those 2 poor performances, was not the answer. And so that's what the Vikings did. They declined to use the franchise tag on Sam Darnold. They rolled with J.J. McCarthy as their franchise quarterback for 2025, and yet again, Sam Darnold was on the open market looking for his next opportunity. Now, Sam Darnold, the past two times he was a free agent, he made the right decision. San Francisco was the right decision, and Minnesota was the right decision. Could he make the right decision for the third year in a row? Enter the Seattle Seahawks, who were entering a retool of their own. They were quickly moving away from the Pete Carroll structured roster that had dominated their team for the past 10 years, and they were transitioning into the Mike Macdonald era. In their first year under Mike Macdonald, they were 10-7, but that was the record they were stuck under with Pete Carroll. So the GM John Snyder thought, it's time to make a move, and it's time to make a Super Bowl caliber roster out of this team because we believe we have a Super Bowl caliber coach. So that offseason, they decided to retool their entire offense. They traded away DK Metcalf and let Tyler Lockett, a longtime Seattle Seahawk, walk in free agency. What's funny enough about this whole situation is that they offered Geno Smith a lucrative contract extension. They thought he was their franchise guy. But after trading away DK Metcalf and letting Tyler Lockett walk and letting Pete Carroll walk out the door as well, Geno Smith had had enough of Seattle. He wanted out. So he requested a trade, and he was later reunited with Pete Carroll with the Las Vegas Raiders. And that left Seattle with a hole that they haven't had in a very long time because they had 10 years of success with Russell Wilson at quarterback and easily transitioned with Geno Smith, who was a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback under them. But unfortunately, now they were left without a quarterback. So what did they do? They hit the open market and offered Sam Darnold a deal he could not refuse. 3 years, $100 million to be their next franchise quarterback. Now, this move was left with a lot of skepticism because Geno Smith at this time had a lot of really good PR with the NFL and with the NFL media. Many thought the Seahawks were downgrading. Many thought that they should have never traded Geno Smith in the first place. Many thought Sam Darnold was just a holdover for their third-round pick, Jalen Milroe, who earlier in his college career had some first-round pick buzz. Sam Darnold, according to many, was not the answer in Seattle. But here's another opportunity for Sam Darnold to yet again prove his haters wrong. No one expected Sam Darnold to be the franchise guy in Seattle and lead yet another elite team in the NFL. But in 2025, that's exactly what happened. The Seattle Seahawks finally broke out of that middle-of-the-road pack in the NFL, and they broke out to be one of the best teams in the NFL. 14-3, number one overall seed in the NFC, the number one scoring defense in the NFL, and an offense that was complimentary because of how well Sam Darnold was playing. Now, I will say he did not have the greatest year on paper, but he did his job, and that's what's most important for Sam Darnold. He did what he needed to do. If he played like New York Jets Sam Darnold, the Seahawks are not in the same position that they are today. And at the end of this season, Sam Darnold was put in a very familiar situation, fighting for the number one seed in the last week of the year against a top rival in their division. They played the San Francisco 49ers in Week 18 for the number one seed in the NFC. Winner gets the bye, and they get home field advantage. The last time we saw Sam Darnold in this spot, the lights were way too bright, and he folded under pressure. But this time, Sam Darnold did just enough to get the Seattle Seahawks a win in a pivotal situation and the number one seed in the NFC. For the second time in his career, Sam Darnold was in the playoffs with lofty expectations. And in this year's playoffs, the expectations weren't as loud as the year before because he did not hear any of the noise in the divisional round game against the San Francisco 49ers, a rematch from a couple weeks prior. They embarrassed, and I mean embarrassed, the 49ers in that game. They cruised all the way to the NFC Championship game, where they ended up facing a familiar foe in 2025, the Los Angeles Rams. Now, as we know, the Rams and Seahawks have had battles this season, but the Rams have also been the Achilles heel for Sam Darnold, not just this season, but throughout his career. So how would Sam Darnold respond to these performances against the Rams? How would he respond to the media? How would he respond to all the critics throughout his career that said he would never get to this point? Well, in the words of Homelander from The Boys, it was perfect. It's perfect to the last minute detail. Because Sam Darnold put together one of the greatest performances in NFC Championship history, and I do not believe that's an understatement. 346 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, clutch throw after clutch throw, including 2 clutch throws on the very last drive of the game that clinched the game for the Seahawks. And of course, most importantly, 0 turnovers. Something that critics throughout his career said he could not shake, the turnovers. He had a clean game on the biggest stage of his career up to that point. Sam Darnold delivered, and he lived up to his paycheck. In a league where we basically see QB redemption take place every year up to this point, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, all those other reclamation projects, they cannot compare to the story that is Sam Darnold. I think it's one of the better stories in modern football today. It's also led to ask myself a couple what ifs about the entire situation for Sam Darnold's career. Starting off with the New York Jets, what if they decided to keep Sam Darnold for his 5th year over drafting Zach Wilson? I think this is a legitimate question to ask because if you look at the Jets roster and what they built afterwards, after drafting Zach Wilson, that's a very elite team, and the quarterback situations that they went through were terrible. After 2 tumultuous years, Zach Wilson just proved to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL and was holding back a Super Bowl caliber defense on the other end. If Sam Darnold is in year 5, year 6, maybe even year 7, with that defense on the other side, with guys like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall at running back, with still not the greatest offensive line, but a serviceable offensive line around him, could he lead the New York Jets back to relevance and success? Because we know Aaron Rodgers couldn't do it, but could a revitalized Sam Darnold under a new head coach in Robert Saleh, under a much better roster, under a good GM in Joe Douglas, who was quoted saying that we failed Sam Darnold, could he have success with a different roster around him? Unfortunately, the dysfunction that was around Sam Darnold could not be fixed, but could it be fixed under a new regime? And of course, the biggest what if up to this point is what if Sam Darnold stayed with the Minnesota Vikings? And it's past the 2 games where he disappointed. It's more of how J.J. McCarthy has looked in his first year. Because right now, people are not convinced that 9 is a franchise quarterback in the NFL, while Sam Darnold has led his team to the Super Bowl. All the debates that were being had this time last year, many who were on Sam Darnold's side have been proven right. The Vikings had one of the best defenses in the NFL and brought back most of their offensive players. Are the Vikings sitting here in Super Bowl contention, maybe even in the Super Bowl, if they kept Sam Darnold this year? Are they better in the future if Sam Darnold is their franchise quarterback over J.J. McCarthy? Could they have built a better offensive line if they traded J.J. McCarthy for draft capital to really round out their Super Bowl caliber roster? It's a what if, we'll never know. But right now, we know that Sam Darnold is a starting quarterback in the Super Bowl. And I think his story up to this point has really just been one of the better ones we've ever seen. That's going to end the video. If you're asking me who I'm rooting for in the Super Bowl, I think the answer is pretty clear throughout this video. It's Sam Darnold. I would love to see him finish off this redemption arc story with the Super Bowl on his ring finger. But thank you guys for watching. More videos like this coming soon. I want to do more story type of videos in the future. I wanted to start with Sam Darnold after that great NFC Championship game because it was one of the best I've ever seen. But I'll see y'all next time. More videos on the way. Peace, y'all.